Hi, my name is Gudrun from GE Designs, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this Trivet runner made with a quilt as you go method. You can find the free pattern on our website, so go ahead and print that out so you can continue on. Your fabrics should be cut into some 2.5-inch strips. We have a couple of 1.5-inch rectangles, and then we have our feature fabric, and I wanted to show you how I like to cut this one because it is this beautiful landscape. And so I like to press my piece open. I already cut the strip to the right width, and what I did here, I tried to look at the scene and just cut the width that would make it look, include all the things that I wanted on there. So we need 2 rectangles out of 3 rectangles. We need one that is going to be our center, that's 10.5 by 18.5, and then 2 smaller rectangles on the side. So since this is a scene, I like to cut it as it would appear in the runner. So I'm going to grab my ruler, I'm going to line a horizontal line here on the bottom, and I know I'm kind of centered on that fabric, so that I can see where my cuts are going to be. They're going to be through the 18.5 and the 0, and I can see if I'm cutting up something that I don't want to cut up and align myself any which way I want in that sense. So now I'm going to make a cut through those 2 slits, through the 0 and 18.5, and that will give me my large rectangle here. I'm going to set that aside, and now I can cut the side pieces. I'm going to flip this one this way and that way, and now I can cut them together, just aligning my 0 slit right on the edge of the fabric here, and cut my 8.5 for the sides. And so then I just flip them out and lay them somewhere where they're ready, so I know which one is on the right, which one is on the left. So the next thing we want to do is prepare our backing and batting. Now we're going to be using 2 layers of batting, and I recommend fusing these together with basting spray. So the batting that you have you have a polyester batting, and then you have the insulated batting. So how I layer this, I put the insulated batting on the bottom next to the backing fabric, and then that shiny side up, and then I use my spray adhesive my basting spray to spray the batting to the insulating material, so what this does is now, once we have our table runner done, this is heat insulating, so you can put hot items right on the runner, which is why we call it a Trivet runner. So the first thing you want to do is, once you have layered it all together, I just drew center lines through the middle both ways. And we're going to take our big rectangle of the feature fabric and just going to center that right in the middle. So I'm going to fold it in half here, make a couple of creases so that those creases are going to match my vertical line, and then I'm going to do the same thing the other direction, make creases, and those are going to match my horizontal line. And that way you know you are centered on the top. There we go. And we want to just put a few pins to hold that big piece in place. But before we start sewing Quilt As You Go, this is a quick Quilt As You Go project, we want to do a little bit, this is a big piece, so we want to do a little bit of quilting to add to the stability and securing that fabric for if it needs washing and things like that, because it is a runner that we want to put food on. So what I did with my first one, I just did simple vertical lines. I stitched vertical lines every 2 inches. But you can, of course, do whatever. You can do diagonal, you can do a cross hatch, you can do free motion, whatever you want to do. This is simple to do with a 2-inch grid. So what I like to use is my handy Stripology ruler. I will just place that here along the top fabric, and because we're going to need a seam allowance on the side, so I will actually align my fabric with the 1/4 inch line here, and then I'm going to use a water erasable pen and just make little markings. So I'm making a mark on the 2-inch line, so just following my ruler here, and then 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and then not needed on the 18. And I'm going to do the same thing, just flipping it to the other side. And then I can just have little markings that I just connect, then I can connect the lines. So same thing. And now all I have to do is turn my ruler on the side, put my edge of my ruler on the 2 markings, and draw a line. So it's very faint, just so that you can see it. This, of course, will come out with water, so no worries if that it will, you know, leave a mark on the fabric. And we're stitching right over that line. So next up, you want to make sure that you have a walking foot on your sewing machine, and you want to also make sure, let me see, that one is hard to see, there it is, that you have a thread color that will blend nicely into the top. So I'm using just a light gray for mine, and then in the bobbin, you want to have a thread color that also blends in with your backing. So I'm using a darker gray for the back, because if you got our advent box, you will have this nice dark green backing. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to just top stitch these, following these lines all the way down. Now you see that I've stitched this all down. I'm going to remove my pins, and now we're going to place our 1.5 inch rectangles right sides together on each end here, making sure we pin this in place, and same thing on the other side. And now we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam on each side. And because we have such a thick batting, I would always recommend a scant 1/4 inch seam. And then I'm going to stitch and then press out. So I press this outwards, and the next step is to add our side rectangles. And so I have my one side here. I'm going to flip it over, do the same thing, align the raw edges, pin this down. And then I'm going to do the same with my other side rectangle. So we're going to first stitch it through the layers, press outwards, and then we'll continue on after that. So now we've pressed outwards, and what we want to do now is continue our top stitching the quilting in both of those side rectangles. So I'm just going to continue on with my 2-inch wide lines. So I'm going to start on the other side here and make my markings. And now I can just put my 0 right here on the seam, and that will give me the right distances. So it'll just be 3 seams on each side. So very simple to do. So add those markings on both sides and then go ahead and stitch as we did with the center piece. Now I have finished quilting the side pieces. So next up is adding our long borders. So we take our 2.5-inch strips and we're just going to layer them on top, the long sides, on the top and bottom, right sides together, and pin them down. I like to use these long flathead magic pins. They're a little bit thicker, so when you're pinning through all those layers, they are not going to bend on you. Love them for quilt as you go. And they're still sharp. Sometimes when you have thicker pins, they're not as sharp. So we're just going to pin this down, and then we're going to trim it to length. So when you get to the end, you're just going to trim the length to size. And then we're going to do the same thing to the bottom, because we're going to sew both at the same time. Trim my end here. And grab some pins and pin down. Now you may have noticed in the pattern that I had you cut your binding at 2.5 inches. Normally I like to cut my binding at 2 1/4, but because we have 2 layers of batting, it's a lot thicker. So I do recommend a little bit wider binding for that. So don't think that that's a typo on my part. I'm going to trim the end here. And then finish pinning. And now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew each side. So now we have the sides, long sides done, and then we just need to finish our short ends. And so we take our last strip here. I'm just going to cut it on the fold. I'm going to lay it along the short ends, short sides of the runner. Trim this part. And then pin that in place. Do the same on both sides. It's a fun, quick project that you can make in just a quick evening. And how fun it is to have different ones for the different seasons whenever you are expecting big gatherings for your dining table. And you want to be able to set those hot plates right on the table, not have to worry about your table getting damaged or having multiple trivets. Like so. And now we're going to sew the last two sides. There it is. So now all that is left is to trim the runner along the outside edge. So I love to use my XL ruler. I lay one side even with the outside here, and I can have another side here. You want to use, maybe if you have one, a little bit thicker rotary cutter when doing this. And then we're just going to cut through all the layers. Right now my runner is trimmed up and ready for binding. And of course I prepped my binding. I got it all ready to go, already looped onto my bindini. So much fun and ready to go. Like I said, I cut it at 2.5 inches, so it's a little bit wider. I just like to sew it to the back of my runner, bring the edges to the front, and then top stitch on my machine, because I know this runner is going to get washed a lot, and that machine binding is going to hold really nicely in the wash. I hope you enjoyed making this really quick runner, perfect to use for all your hot dishes when you are serving up a great meal. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.